Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. Reddit lawyers, what is your greatest, most fierce I rest my case moment? Part 4. Not a lawyer, but was working with our corporate lawyers on a patent infringement case. I was an engineer specializing in the technology in question, a document scanning system. At the time, we had a relationship with a company that provided OEM products for our lower-end scanning market, and in the meantime, we were working on a higher-end machine of our own design. As our new design was getting ready for market, they accused us of violating one of their patents. The wording of the patent in question was very, very broad, and it indeed looked bad for us. They invited us to their HQ to discuss the issue and potential remedies, best case, licensing fee, worst case, back to the drawing board. We had met several times before the trip to prep, and despite the efforts of our engineering team, we could not find a hole in the patent. We flew out to their HQ and upon landing, met one more time in the hotel lobby. We were prepared for the worst. It was then that I noticed some wording in the patent that was quite specific about the way that the document scanning surface was held in place while the scanning head moved. Their patent described the surface resting on fixed rails with the scanning head moving beneath it. However, because we were very concerned about maintaining a constant focal distance from the scanning head to the document, our scanning surface was captured by the head itself, not the rails, so that the document surface would freely track any minor up and down or twisting motion of the head due to rail detection or dirt or what have you. In fact, if the head was not present in the machine, the scanning surface would just fall into the bottom of the unit. Well, the lawyers looked at me in shock. We talked it through and they started grinning and soon we were all smiling like idiots. It was bulletproof. We went into the meeting, they had their corporate lawyers, engineers, and business sector managers, and after all the righteous outrage was exposed, along with a desire to somehow find a way forward and maintain a good working relationship, blah blah blah, it was show and tell time. Our lawyer simply said, "We don't believe that we violate your patent," and using the prototype that we had brought along, I showed them why. It was beautiful. They just sat there at first, then their technical guys asked me to show them again, then they left to have a private conference. We just tried to keep it professional while we waited, but we knew we had them. They came back all apologies, saying how they hoped that our fruitful partnership could continue as it had been so successfully before, etc. When we left, we went straight to a nearby bar and celebrated. By the end of the night, our straight-laced corporate attorney was all, "I love you guys, man." It was a great day. I'm not a lawyer, but an old landlord sued me a few years ago. This is how it went. A collection agency called me about a year after I moved out to say I hadn't paid last month's rent. At the time, I should have looked into it, but I sent a check straight to my landlord and didn't think much of it. I heard from a lawyer a few years ago telling me I had to go to small claims court for an unpaid bill. I got in touch to find out what I meant to pay but didn't. It was the exact same bill. Lawyers' fees, court costs, and late payment fees are added to the bill. This claim went from $1,200 to over $5,000. It was crazy. Now I'm going to do my research. I go to my bank and look through all the checks I signed during the year I lived there. It dawned on me at this point that the unpaid rent for which I had been putting into collections years before wasn't needed at all when I paid it. I had proof that I had paid my rent and a security deposit every month on time for a year. They never returned the deposit. I get scared right away and think, they've been putting this in my credit report for years. I checked my report and there was nothing on it. I always pay my bills on time. But they start putting late payments on my credit report the week before I go to court. My credit is great. I tried several times to get in touch with them to let them know I had paid and could show proof. They didn't answer. The day of the hearing comes, and I'm waiting for my turn when this slug of a person, she looked so much like Roz from Monsters, Inc., calls me aside. I think she might be at the courthouse, so I go over. She's the lawyer who's trying to get paid. Here's what she gives me. If I lose today, I'll have to pay up to $10,000, but they'll make it all go away if I agree to pay $150 every month for 15 months. No thank you, was all I said, and I left. When we go before the judge, she talks for what seems like hours about how I was a bad tenant and how hard it was for the landlord to get paid. She kept going on and on. I was yelling. Then it was my turn to talk. I turned in the proof that I had paid for the whole year along with my bank statements that showed the payments had been processed and sat down. The slug was as white as a sheet and didn't know I knew this. I also told the judge that she had talked to me alone and tried to get me to pay them without going through the judge. The judge was so mad that she yelled at her face for 3 or 4 minutes straight. I have a few good ones. One was during the summer when I worked as an intern for a judge. Reading and summarizing moving papers in family court was my job. I also had to make a suggestion for a ruling and explain the law behind it. All of them are called orders to show cause for blank. As long as there isn't an actual motion to compel or an emergency, in LA County, most people who go to family court represent themselves, so the moving papers are always informal. Dr. Judge, I'd like to have Sally 1 more day a week. Dr. Judge, I lost my job and I can't pay this much child support, etc. One made me mad. Dear Judge, it said, I'd like to have my daughter stay the night on Monday so I can take her to school on Tuesdays since I don't have to work until the afternoon. I told the judge that something wasn't right. We didn't know that this man had a job and his ex-wife didn't want the change to happen. That's why I thought the ruling should be deny. The judge didn't agree, so he told the man he would at least have to make his case in court. When they come back the next day, Mom says she can't change the custody arrangement on Monday because she works and can't drop off the kids that night. She wants her child to have a dad, so she suggests that they meet on Tuesday or Wednesday night instead. What the judge says is that sounds fair. Dad tells the judge, oh no, my gang meets at my house on those nights. It's not secure. The judge then turns around and takes custody away from his home completely, setting up only supervised visits. Following this, gangbanger dad tries to climb over the table in court and attack the judge. Everyone's told to duck and cover, and the gangbanger's taken away in handcuffs. In just 5 minutes, he went from almost getting an extra day with his kid to not having custody and being arrested. I told the judge something wasn't right. The other story from a civil trial I did will have to wait because this one got too long. What's your best story about quitting a job, Part 4? I worked as one of 3 engineers in a manufacturing facility several years ago. Our day jobs included designing tools for employees, maintaining machinery, and generally boosting productivity. Our site management team decided to take on a high-profile project at some point, moving equipment from one building to another to facilitate material flow. When corporate representatives visited, our management would talk about how much effort and focus they were putting into the move, claiming that it was their top priority. The fact that some people weren't totally committed to that vision was the only issue. Only a portion of the machines in my area were being moved, so in addition to my day job, I had to schedule contractors, figure out how to operate machines that had been around since the 1930s, figure out how to move the machines without interfering with other areas of the plant's regular production, and get the machines back up and running at capacity. The other 2 engineers were able to resume their regular tasks. I was one of the few salaried staff members on the entire site who was likely significantly impacted by this high-priority change. I believe I took maybe 2 days off between October and March of the following year, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Even though I was already working 16-hour days and 10-hour weekends, the company felt free to put pressure on me because I was paid. My hourly workers were able to take periodic breaks because we were asked to reduce the amount of overtime. Since my wife and I were going to have our second child soon, and I was also enrolled in graduate school at the time, I didn't think I had time to look for another job. Needless to say, I asked for help when I needed it and never received it. When I visited HR one day, I was asked why the transition was going so badly and why output was declining. It seemed that my request wasn't a good fit for what they needed me to do. We thus discussed how to handle it. I told them that although I would like to find another job, I didn't want to let the relocation project put them in a difficult situation. They informed me that while they would like to post a job for my replacement, they would prefer to do it covertly to avoid raising suspicion that someone was taking my place. They didn't want to abandon me either because they're fully aware of my family and school circumstances. Ultimately, I wrote a resignation letter with a 3-month notice period, and they then posted an opening. It was well known that we were behind schedule on the project, so our narrative was that the new employee would assist me. We had agreed to extend our agreement month to month if neither of us could find a suitable replacement or I was unable to find employment during that time. We had to extend the contract for an additional month before I could begin working somewhere else, so I cut back on my hours to the typical 8 to 10 hours per day. They still hadn't found a replacement by the time I left. I found out later that my replacement lasted less than a year, and sometime after that, the company decided to split the duties I was doing between 2 new roles. I worked at a popular coffee shop chain, and I had one of the worst managers I think there may have ever been. She used food handling techniques that led to a massive cockroach infestation, among many other things I won't go into. Oh, and it took her years to master the art of making even the simplest drink, a frappuccino. When this occurred, we were actually going to write corporate about her incapacity to manage. My fiancé worked at the register while I was in the drive-thru and my other friend was behind the bar. When I asked where my medium caramel frappuccino was, my manager said she was working on it and that she would try to help by making some cold drinks, but it was taking some time. She then gives me a small caramel frappuccino in a medium-sized empty cup. I was already pretty peed off, so I decided to just throw it away and remake it since the customer paid for a medium instead of a small. When I threw it away, she was standing close to the trash can, so I suppose some might have splashed up at her. She then yells, "Did you just throw that at me?" as she steps back. All I wanted to do was remake the dumb drink and move on, so I just kind of rolled my eyes. She goes on to say, "I'm done, I threw it at her. F this S place," I exclaimed, and exited through the rear. My manager screams at my fiancé, asking if she wanted to follow me, as she was taking orders in the drive-thru while crying. My fiancé declined because she understood that neither of us could lose our jobs and survive. I was so furious that I just got in my car and went. In order to at least have someone on my side and let them know I wasn't just being impolite, I ultimately pulled over to call Partner Resources. They advised me to get in touch with my district manager, so I did. However, I didn't think she was concerned enough to make a difference. I decided not to call her at that moment and instead just kept driving. It's my district manager who calls me while I'm in the car. Turns out that our DM made an unexpected visit shortly after I left, which I found strange as I had never called her. She tells me that my manager had put in a resignation and left. She then asks me to return and complete my shift so that business can continue in the store. I ended up keeping my job, and on my drive back, I actually passed my manager. I'd gone pretty far out, so yeah. I was employed by a post-production company that was relatively modest in size. There are 3 employees and the owner. We were treated like garbage by the boss, despite the fact that our work was the only thing that kept the company afloat. He didn't do anything but order us around, and to tell you the truth, his ideas were extremely out of date and extremely poor. He was the kind of person whose opinion on what's good hasn't changed in the past 15 years, and in my field, if you don't keep up with the times, you're doomed to fail. He was the kind of guy who never changed his mind. Additionally, the customers detested having to work with him, but they were proud of the work that we, the employees, were producing. To such an extent that the most important client had reached out to one of the other individuals and informed him that if he wanted to launch his own business, they would provide a loan to cover the initial expenses and use the new company for all of their work. Consequently, after he had spent approximately 6 months working out all of the details while we all continued to work, he finally quit one day. The new office he had set up is now operational after 2 weeks. I, along with the 3rd employee, resigned from our positions and began working for him when that occurred. The initial company, which had lost all 3 of its employees within a short period of time, also lost their most important customer and ultimately went out of business in a period of less than a year. All of us are having a good time at the new location where we're producing better work and earning more money with it. As a result, everything turned out well for us, and any managers out there should take this experience as a lesson to remember to collaborate with their staff members and not to treat them like S. If you want to watch the part 3, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.